The sun hung low over Springfield, casting a dull orange glow across the town's familiar chaotic sprawl. At the Springfield nuclear power plant, a routine maintenance dig had taken an unexpected turn. Workers, clad in faded jumpsuits, had unearthed something peculiar beneath the reactor's foundation. A jagged, obsidian artifact etched with symbols that seemed to writhe under scrutiny. The object, no larger than a football, pulsed faintly with an unnatural warmth, as if alive. Foreman Jenkins, a grizzled man who'd seen decades of the plant's mishaps, muttered about curses and demanded it be reported. But Mr. Burns, the plant's skeletal owner, had other plans. His eyes gleamed with greed as he ordered the artifact brought to his office, dismissing warnings with a wave of his bony hand. "Superstition is for the weak," he hissed, already envisioning the relic's value on the black market. Word of the discovery spread like wildfire through Springfield's rumor mill. By recess at Springfield Elementary, kids were whispering about a demon rock hidden in Burns's vault. Bart Simpson, ever the troublemaker, soaked up the gossip with a grin. "Sounds like something worth sneaking a peek at," he told Milhouse, his loyal sidekick, as they dodged Skinner's watchful eye. That night, fueled by sugar and bravado, Bart scaled the plant's fence, his skateboard tucked under his arm. The security was laughable. Lenny and Carl were dozing in the guard shack, a half-eaten donut between them. Bart slipped through a cracked window into Burns's office, the air heavy with the scent of old leather and greed. The artifact sat on Burns' desk, bathed in moonlight. Its surface seemed to drink the light, the carved symbols shifting like worms under the skin. Bart's heart raced, not from fear but from the thrill of defiance. "Let's see what all the fuss is about," he muttered, reaching for it. His fingers brushed the stone, and a jolt shot through him, like static but deeper, colder. Startled, he yanked his hand back, knocking the artifact to the floor. It shattered with a sound like a scream, and a black mist poured from the fragments, curling upward with a low, guttural hum. Bart stumbled back, his breath catching as the mist coiled around the room, then vanished through the ceiling. The air felt wrong now, heavy, like it was watching him. He bolted, not looking back. The next morning, Springfield woke to subtle signs of unease. Dogs snarled at empty corners, birds dropped dead mid-flight, littering lawns with tiny, twisted corpses. Marge Simpson, stirring oatmeal in the kitchen, frowned at the sight of a sparrow crumpled on her windowsill, its eyes milky and wrong. "Homer, something's off today," she said, her voice tight. Homer, half buried in the couch with a Duff beer, chuckled. "You worry too much, Marge. Probably just a bad batch of crusty flakes." But even he couldn't ignore the nightmares that had plagued him. Visions of a vast, formless thing whispering his name. At Moe's Tavern, the usual crowd gathered, their banter louder to drown out the creeping dread. Barney belched and launched into a slurred tale about ancient curses, claiming his uncle once saw a glowing rock in Shelbyville. Moe scoffed, polishing a glass. "You're full of it, Barn. Ain't no curse gonna ruin my business." The door creaked open, and Smithers staggered in, his face pale, sweat beading on his brow. "Mr. Burns sent me to check the plant," he gasped, then doubled over, coughing. Blood speckled the floor, and the bar fell silent as small pulsing lumps began to swell beneath the skin of his neck, moving like living things. Moe backed away, his rag dropping. "What the hell is that?" Panic erupted as Smithers collapsed, his body twitching. Barney and Lenny dragged him to Springfield General Hospital, where Dr. Hibbert met them with his usual chuckle, until he saw the patient. The lumps had grown, splitting Smithers' skin to reveal glistening tumor-like masses that writhed independently. This isn't possible," Hibbert stammered, his tools useless as the growth spread in minutes. Nurses screamed, patients fled, and the hospital's fluorescent lights flickered as if in protest. Lisa Simpson, meanwhile, sensed the The gravity of the situation. At the school library, she pored over dusty tomes and obscure websites, her brow furrowed. A reference to an ancient entity, the devourer of sorrow, caught her eye. A being tied to artifacts like the one Bart had described. "It feeds on suffering," she whispered, her pen scratching furiously. "And it's been unleashed." Her thoughts were interrupted by Bart, who slunk into the library, his usual smirk gone. "Lisa, I screwed up," he admitted, recounting the artifact and the mist. His voice cracked, a rare glimpse of fear breaking through his bravado. Lisa's eyes widened, but she steadied herself. "We need to find out what this thing is and how to stop it, together." As night fell, Springfield's unease deepened. Streetlights buzzed erratically, and the air carried a faint, sour stench. At the Simpson house, Marge tucked Maggie into bed, her hands trembling. Homer, oblivious, flipped through TV channels, each one static. In the hospital, Smithers' screams had stopped, replaced by a wet gurgling sound as his body became something else entirely. And somewhere, in the shadows of the town, the entity stirred, its presence a weight on every soul. Bart and Lisa sat in her room, surrounded by books and notes, their pact sealed. They had no idea how vast the horror would grow, but the first step had been taken. Springfield was no longer just a quirky town. It was a stage for a nightmare beyond comprehension. The dawn broke over Springfield, but the light felt wrong, dim, as if filtered through a veil of ash. The town was a ticking bomb, and the disease that had claimed Smithers was no longer a freak incident. By morning, dozens of residents woke to itching welts that swelled into grotesque, pulsing tumors. At the Quick E-Mart, Apu clutched his arm, staring in horror as a lump beneath his skin squirmed like a trapped insect. Across town, Miss Hoover collapsed mid-lesson, her face erupting in fleshy growths that made students scream and flee. Springfield was unraveling, and the entity's influence spread like wildfire, its malevolent hum a faint undercurrent in the air. Marge Simpson stood at her kitchen window, clutching a mug of coffee that had gone cold. The street was eerily quiet, save for the occasional wail of sirens. Maggie played on the floor, but Marge's eyes lingered on her daughter's tiny arms, searching for any sign of the sickness. "Homer, we need to do something," she said, her voice sharp with fear. Homer, nursing a hangover and a cough he refused to acknowledge, shrugged from the couch. "Marge, it's just a flu. Hibbert'll fix it like always." But his bravado faltered when he scratched his chest and felt a hard, throbbing knot beneath his shirt. He yanked his hand away, eyes wide, and said nothing. At City Hall, Mayor Quimby addressed a panicked crowd via a crackling broadcast. "People of Springfield, remain calm. We're declaring a quarantine to contain this situation." His words were drowned out by shouts as citizens stormed the streets, some clutching suitcases, others wielding bats. The quarantine was a farce. Barricades at the town's edges were toppled by desperate families, spreading the infection to Shelbyville and beyond. Helicopters buzzed overhead, their pilots recoiling at the sight of Springfield streets, where figures staggered, their bodies warped by tumors that sprouted limbs and eyes. Lisa and Bart, holed up in Lisa's room, pored over their findings. Lisa's desk was a chaos of books, printouts, and scribbled notes. "The devourer of sorrow thrives on pain," she explained, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "The artifact was its prison. If we can find the fragments Bart broke, we might reconstruct it and trap the entity again." Bart, slouched in a chair, nodded grimly. "I messed this up, Liz. I'll fix it." His usual defiance was tempered by guilt, a weight he carried like a stone. They agreed to start at the source, Burns' office, where the artifact had shattered. The town's descent accelerated. At Springfield General, Dr. Hibbert abandoned his post as patients transformed into horrors. Some in advanced stages had skin that split like overripe fruit, revealing masses of writhing flesh that crawled independently. Nurses barricaded themselves in supply closets, sobbing as the hospital became a charnel house. Chief Wiggum rallied, his officers, but their efforts crumbled when Eddie and Lou succumbed, their bodies twisting into shambling monstrosities that turned on their own. Wiggum fired his pistol, tears streaming, before a tumor burst from his shoulder, silencing his screams. Marge, driven by maternal instinct, fortified the Simpson home. She nailed boards across windows and stockpiled canned food, her hands trembling as she worked. Maggie, usually quiet, whimpered, scratching at small red bumps on her arms. Marge's heart sank, but she forced a smile, singing lullabies to calm her daughter and herself. When Homer suggested fleeing, Marge snapped, "And go where, Homer?" "It's everywhere." Their argument was cut short by a news report. Shelbyville was burning, its residents overtaken by the same plague. Escape was no longer an option. Lisa and Bart ventured out, sneaking through alleys to avoid the chaos. Springfield's streets were a nightmare. Cars abandoned, windows smashed, and bodies slumped in doorways, their tumors still twitching. At the nuclear plant, they found the gates unguarded, the security booth empty, save for a blood-smeared radio. Inside Burns' office, the air was thick, the shattered artifact's fragments gone. A rasping laugh echoed, and Mr. Burns emerged. From the shadows, his frail body grotesquely altered. Tumors bulged from his face, one eye replaced by a glistening mass that pulsed rhythmically. "You meddling brats," he croaked, his voice a wet gurgle. "The fragments are mine." Burns lunged, his movements jerky but fast. Bart, adrenaline surging, grabbed a candelabro from the desk and swung, knocking Burns back. Lisa spotted a hidden safe, its door ajar, and darted to it. Inside were two jagged pieces of the artifact, their surfaces crawling with faint, sickly light. "Got them!" she shouted, stuffing them into her backpack. Burns writhed on the floor, his body collapsing into a mass of flesh and bone, no longer human. Bart gagged, grabbing Lisa's arm. "Let's get out of here." They fled, the plant's alarms blaring as Springfield burned around them. Back home, they hid the fragments under Lisa's bed, their faces pale with exhaustion and dread. Marge greeted them with a fierce hug, but her eyes lingered on Homer, who sat slumped in the living room, his cough worse, his shirt stained with sweat. The fragments were a start, but one piece remained missing, carried by Smithers when he died. As night fell, the entity's hum grew louder, a promise of worse to come. Springfield was a crucible of suffering, and the Simpsons were running out of time. Springfield was a husk of its former self, its streets choked with silence and decay. The sky hung heavy, stained an unnatural black that swallowed the stars. The entity's presence was palpable now, a suffocating weight that twisted reality itself. Shadows danced without light, and the air carried a low, relentless hum that burrowed into the minds of the few still clinging to sanity. The Simpsons' home, once a bastion of warmth, was a fragile fortress. Marge's barricades sagged, and the stench of rot seeped through the walls. Maggie's condition had worsened. Her tiny body was dotted with tumors that pulsed faintly, her cries weak and guttural. Marge sat by her crib, her face etched with despair, whispering prayers that felt hollow. Lisa and Bart huddled in her room, the two artifact fragments laid out on her desk. Their surfaces shimmered with a sickly glow, the carved symbols writhing, like living things. Lisa's notes were scattered, her handwriting frantic. "We have two pieces," she said, her voice hoarse from sleepless nights. "Smithers had the third when he changed. It's probably still in the hospital." Bart nodded, his jaw tight. The guilt of unleashing the entity gnawed at him, but he channeled it into resolve. "Then we go get it. No more running." Homer, slumped in the doorway, coughed violently, a wet, rattling sound. A tumor bulged beneath his collarbone, its surface veined and twitching. "You kids be careful," he rasped. forcing a weak smile. Your old man's still got some fight left. The hospital was their destination, but Springfield's streets were a gauntlet of horrors. Lisa and Bart moved cautiously, sticking to alleys littered with abandoned cars and bodies. Some dead, others still moving, their forms barely human. Tumors had overtaken entire torsos, sprouting limbs that dragged their hosts like puppets. Bart gripped a broken chair leg as a weapon, his knuckles white. Lisa clutched her backpack, the fragments inside clinking softly. They reached Springfield General, its windows dark, the entrance blocked by overturned gurneys. The air inside was thick with the reek of decay, and the hum of the entity was deafening, vibrating in their bones. The hospital was a labyrinth of nightmares. Corridors stretched endlessly, their walls slick with a black oozing substance. Patients, or what remained of them, writhed on the floor, their tumors fusing into grotesque collectives that moaned in unison. Lisa gagged, her flashlight trembling as it swept over a nurse, her face split by a tumor that blinked with a single, milky eye. Bart swung his chair leg at a shambling figure that lunged from the shadows, its body a mass of writhing flesh. "Keep moving!" he shouted, pulling Lisa toward the morgue, where Smithers' body was likely stored. In the morgue, the air was colder, the hum quieter but more oppressive. Corpses lined the walls, many unrecognizable, their tumors still twitching. Lisa spotted Smithers' body, or what was left of it, fused to a massive pulsating growth that clung to the ceiling. Its surface rippled, sprouting tendrils that swayed like seaweed. Bart's stomach churned, but he climbed onto a table, his hands shaking as he hacked at the mass with a scalpel scavenged from the floor. The tumor screeched, a sound that clawed at their minds, and black ichor sprayed, burning Bart's skin. He gritted his teeth, tearing free the final artifact fragment, a jagged shard that pulsed in his hand. "Got it!" he gasped, tumbling back as the tumor collapsed, its tendrils thrashing. They fled the morgue, pursued by creatures that crawled from the shadows, their bodies a mockery of humanity. Bart swung his chair leg wildly, clearing a path as Lisa clutched the fragments. Back at home, they found Marge cradling Maggie, whose tumors had spread, her face barely recognizable. Marge's own skin was marred by small, swelling lumps, and she wept silently. Homer, now barely able to stand, his body a patchwork of growths, forced himself upright. "You got the pieces?" he croaked. Lisa nodded, tears streaming. "We can try to seal it." In the living room, Lisa arranged the fragments, reciting a ritual from her notes, a patchwork of ancient texts and desperate guesses. The air thickened, the hum rising to a scream as reality warped. Shadows coalesced into a formless mass, the devourer of sorrow manifesting as a void with countless eyes. Homer, his strength fading, roared and threw himself at it, his body a shield for his children. "Finish it, Lisa!" he bellowed, as the entity's tendrils engulfed him, his screams fading into a wet gurgle. Lisa chanted, her voice breaking, but the fragments refused to fuse. The ritual faltered, the entity's laughter shaking the house. The end came swiftly. Marge and Maggie succumbed, their bodies collapsing into tumor-ridden husks. Bart, tumors, now blooming on his arms, shielded Lisa as she scribbled a final warning in her diary, sealing it in a metal box. "Someone has to know," she whispered, her fingers swelling, her vision blurring. Bart slumped beside her, his breath ragged. Outside, Springfield was silent, its people gone, their remains carpeting the streets in a grotesque tapestry. The entity sated, dissolved into the black sky, leaving nothing but devastation. Lisa's diary, buried under rubble, was the last trace of Springfield's fall, a futile testament to a horror that spared no one. The town was a tomb, its quirky, heart extinguished, consumed by a nightmare too vast for hope or redemption.